can share this with other people. And so let me show you what we're doing today. So welcome, and this is session 2 of the Unopened Gift. And I just always want to share this, that we're recording. We're going to post this. We're going to use these. So just want you to be aware of that. Um, don't let those transcription apps in, mainly because I'm uncomfortable with them, not because they're bad, just that I don't really like them. And yeah, if you would share your thoughts with the whole group, that would be great. So some people are more inclined to use the chat than others, but if you can presence it for everybody, that would be fabulous. We can all stay in the conversation. So here's what I am curious about. So here's what's coming to me to ask you to start out. So the first thing is, what insights have come to you this week about emotions? So, hi, Thaisa, Joe. Yeah, welcome. So, what insights have come to you this week based on our conversation last week, if anything? And second question is, what questions do you have about this chapter? So, I can go through it. I have lots of slides. I can share those, but I think it would be more tailored if you would just ask me, what are you interested about, right? If you read it, like what questions were provoked? So you can answer both of those, one of those, either of those, but would love to hear from you. So Jolene,
There was a part of the chapter where you mentioned sleeping and emotions, and we weren't quite sure how that worked. And so I took a 4-hour course from the top sleep expert of the world because I got interested, Matthew Walker, and he said that during the REM sleep cycle, it's called overnight therapy. We actually process emotional memories in a neurochemically safe environment with low epinephrine. So I took the whole 4-hour course, thought that was fascinating. And then I talked to a person she's, what is it called? Hypnotherapist. And she said, before you fall asleep, that's when you should really set intentions. So my question to you is, I really feel that optimism is obviously a really important emotion. In your opinion, how can we turn that into a mood aside from a gratitude list, looking for sparks of joy? What are some practical application or tips that you have to become more optimistic as a mood, not an emotion?
okay. So can I make a note and come back to that? But okay,
Mhm.
how do we elevate optimism to a mood? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sandy.
Okay, so it has been from last week to this week, and it couldn't be more perfect timing to go back to the beginning of the book because today I reread my notes and I'm just use this example. I published a book. Wow. And I sat there with it in my hand, not feeling a thing. And before that, I was excited. Well, now it's in my hand. And I could not understand, right? Kind of that love hate. Um, uh, what was the other one? Happy for another, but also envious. And I was like, what is happening? So I settled myself in, grabbed my emotions book, and I said, let's play ball. And I envisioned that I was the hitter and you can throw them at me because I felt it was necessary, right? Because the self-doubt that I have carried, even though I had a wonderful imposter syndrome mask, it hit me so hard. Like, there's doubt here. Like, it's just a book, Sandy, no big deal. Like, and so the fact that going back to where was my mood? And talking Jolene, I have been listening since starting this journey about 3 months ago. Every night I put in hypno some kind of sleep pattern, Louise Hayes, just because my brain, and it's literally my mood exists before the experience. I was like, what is my mood with this? So the emotions this week, right? And this is the more I allowed them to, kind of be present and hang around, play ball with me, learn ones that I hadn't really felt, has been extraordinarily helpful to get me to where I'm like, oh, honey, you just slept with an author. So, it took a long time to like let them bubble up. It was like a safeguard. I
Mm,
was waiting for something to trigger. And so yeah, it's and so my question for you is, I've always been intrigued about the mood side, right? So
mhm,
what mood was I in, which I thought was optimistic, and I know it's emotional, but I was like, oh. And then, I was waiting for the experience. However, what I found was I had to experience the emotion to get in a good mood.
okay, great question. So what else? What's come to you this week? What questions about the reading?
I can share something.
Please.
Uh,
Yes.
I think this week I stayed in the emotion for a while until it finished work. It's work. I think on the page 43 there is a phrase about it that we can allow the emotions do what needs to do for us, bring us the learning, the wisdom. And last week, I think, since our last session, I think I stay on that, and with doubt, with ideas, with enthusiasm. I was enthusiastic.
Hmm.
Sorry about my English,
No,
but
perfect.
that did you got it?
Perfect. Yeah.
And I could understand more when I want to focus on my career now, since I learned more about emotion, and we talked a little bit in the morning then.
Mhm.
But I think it happens because I just feel and try to understand step by step the action that I could take from the emotion.
Mhm. Yeah. Lovely. Thank you. Wonderful.
Um, I'll share. First of all, um, I enjoyed listening to the first recording and kind of getting started on this kind of more learning pathway, and it kind of it's running parallel to my own learning pathway, and understanding my own emotions better, understanding how much I've sort of bypassed or like covered up or ignored in many cases, things that have
Mhm.
just been inconvenient. And so I also appreciated part of your chapter, Dan, around like that difficult part of your life where you didn't realize almost to the extent to which you were uh, kind of in the throes of that. You didn't realize
Emotionally ignorant. I didn't realize.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And
Yeah.
I think that I spent a lot of those like decades in my life in particular. I think I spent quite a bit of time like knowing about, and then you make the differentiation between knowing about and knowing. And so I think I'm on this path to like just better, more attuned knowing of and understanding of my own
Mhm.
emotions. And it's been a real gift. So thanks.
Lovely. Thank you, Brenda.
Hi, Dan. I'll go next.
Yes, you have
Uh,
been.
so yeah, so from last session, I understood that, I also belong to that class of people who understand a lot of things through logic. Probably that has been the education system that has taught us. So I feel that I have a long way to go. So that was there, as part of our last chapter. And while I was like reading through the second chapter, these are the two topics wherein I was not very clear exactly, what you are trying to. Maybe in this session you can help me out. First is that, that we learn emotions through immersion. So what exactly is that? And if you could, I really couldn't really understood how exactly we'll go about doing that. And if there is a possibility that you could give us more clear path, or you could help me how to do it, I would like to do that. So
Okay.
that's one part wherein you could just help me with that clarity. And the
Okay.
second portion was in we are not our emotion, wherein you're talking about that we should be able to distinguish between the core coherence and the energy of emotion. So
Mhm.
what is that core coherence that you are mentioning? And
Okay.
I just couldn't follow that portion. So
Very
these are
good.
the two
Thank
questions
you.
that I have. If you could clarify in this.
I will certainly do that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank
We'll come
thank you.
back to those two. So other questions that people been scratching their head about, like what's this guy trying to say in this book? I just don't get it. Yeah, Melissa.
So, like Jolene and Sandy, it sounds like I am really intrigued by the moods, emotions versus moods. But my question is, I was really only able to distinguish in this chapter that the difference that was stated was seemed to be related to mainly time. So that emotions come quickly, they can also pass quickly, mood kind of comes to stay. But I was wondering about other distinctions or differences between emotions and moods, and kind of like what goes into creating a mood. um, and then definitely, I would echo what Jolene and Sandy already asked about kind of interrupting those moods, or being able to take charge of those in some way to head off moods that maybe we don't think are going to be helpful to us, and also
Yeah.
dial up moods that we think this would really help me.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Moods sounds like moods is a big topic. We can certainly address that. And it's a great one because we talk a lot about emotions, but moods, they're kind of like the poor cousin, to emotions. We don't really talk, yeah, moods, but they're really important. So I think it's a great topic to talk about. Marcel.
I liked the way you put hyper rationalization and the devaluation of emotions first. I like
Mhm.
that. And then I like the way you put emotions and learning. So my question is, since we have devalued them, what do you what do you sniff in people? Like what do you sense in people when all they want to do is talk about emotions and yet they're not really very keen on learning emotions? Do you sense any emotion about the emotions that they come across that keeps them in I just want to learn about them. I'm not really very keen on learning them.
Mhm.
Anything that we as practitioners can be sensing, more mindful of, helpful with when we're out there normalizing emotions with humans?
Yeah, absolutely. Another great question. All right, emotions about emotions. So now we're getting somewhere. So who else? Let's take a couple more questions. Like I don't know, what's been kicking around for you in your reading, after your reading? What what would be helpful?
Well, I have a thought. I'm not sure if it's a question yet, but something Marcel just said triggered a bit of it for me. Two things that I really noticed in this chapter um, that caught my attention, and the one was um, certainly the past, present, and future orientation of emotions
Mm,
that keeps us out of, I think, effective action. It can keep us out of effective action in the present on our own behalf. And the other point that caught my attention very much so was it's just the way I am. This is just how I'm wired. That kind of surrender to whether it's nature or nurture, it's just I'm powerless to do anything about it. And that coupled with the um, tendency to blame others for our emotions. He
mm,
made me mad. He hurt me. Um, he offended my dignity. Um, all of those, from the point of view of a coach, all of those are so disempowering.
mm,
And and I think also, as what Marcel just said, holding emotions at arm's length, like saying, yeah, I'd like to study about them, but I'm not sure I want to go deeper than that. That's also another way of surrendering my authority over my own life.
mm,
Um, and it occurs to me maybe in there's the teaser or the invitation um, to come back to power in your own life is a way of inviting people into the exploration, the deeper exploration of emotion.
mm. Lovely.
It's just a thought.
Lovely. Well, let me start here. Oh, Elaine, whoa, your hand flashed up. I just saw it there for a second. All right, Elaine.
Mine kind of goes along with what Marie and Marcel just said too. My question is, why do people believe emotions are fixed?
Hmm.
Mhm.
Mm.
Okay. Well, let me
Mm.
let me just weave my way through all of these. So we'll see if we end up saying if I end up saying anything of value. But so if you think Marie, I'm going to start with Marie. So if you think Marie about the title of the book, The Unopened Gift, why would we call it that? Well, not just because emotions are cool. Oh, wow, isn't it nice to know I have emotions? But because when you take responsibility for your emotions, it's incredibly empowering. And when you don't, you're doing exactly what you're talking about. You're giving your power away. So when I say it's my emotion, I am responsible to decide what to do with it, how to act out of it, how to live it, how to understand it. Then I'm taking responsibility for my emotions. And when I do that, one thing I'll quit doing is I'll quit saying she made me angry or she made me happy because she didn't
Mm.
either one of those. Right. So the
Mhm.
first thing is that I think if we were going to make a bumper sticker about emotions, it would say take accountability. That would be the number one thing. Because the moment that any of us start saying, yeah, well, I can't use them as an excuse anymore, they're called my emotions for a reason because they're mine. It's just like my money. I got to decide what to do with it. My debt, my health. I'm the only one who can really take responsibility for them. So I think that's the first thing. And I think language, as you pointed out, betrays us. We've heard this our whole lives. She made me so happy. Every Beatles song ever written said, she made me happy. Every 1960s song that we grew up on, sorry, we old people grew up on, right, is that that's what we heard over and over and over. So, well, it must be true because that's what we heard. And the weird part is it kind of feels that way, doesn't it? It kind of feels like, yeah, that person made me angry. They did that. They said that, and I feel angry, so they must have done it. So there's the problem I think that we have is that one, it's a conversation we've been in our whole lives, and we've never ever been taught to challenge that conversation, that myth. But the other thing is it's easy. It's way easier if somebody makes me angry, then I'm not responsible for it. Then they got to do something, right? Oh, they ought to apologize to me because they made me angry or they hurt me or they upset me. So I think this taking accountability, taking responsibility is huge. We're taught, most of us, when we're children, when we're teenagers, we're taught to take responsibility for our actions, or at least our parents try to teach us that, to do our homework, to take a shower, to brush our teeth, to, all these things that we're taught as children and adolescents. But nobody ever tells us to take responsibility for our emotions. What we're told is go to your room, and when you've settled down, then you can come out and you can talk to me about that. That's what we're taught. That's the best that we've known how to do. So I think this is the first thing. It's like, absolutely. If I want agency in my life, if I want to, if I want to be the designer, the author of my life, the only way to do that that I know of is to take responsibility for my emotions, to be accountable. So for me, that's a great place to begin. And that's really why we named it the Unopened Gift. Because once you do, once you recognize them, once you see how much it changes your life when you take responsibility for them, oof, that is a huge gift. Life is different. So until you do that, you don't know that. You don't know what it feels like. Just like you don't know what it feels like physically to take responsibility for your behaviors. But then when you do, wow, it actually, you feel pride, you feel accomplishment, you feel success. You can feel really good about the things you achieve. Why? Because you initiate them. You made sure they happened. You took responsibility for them. So for me, great, great beginning place. But another question is, well, why don't we do that? Well, like I said, one, we haven't been taught to do it. Two, we've been fooled into thinking that other people were responsible for our emotions. Third, we haven't been shown how. Fourth, it's really uncomfortable. It's really unpleasant sometimes to take responsibility for our emotions. I remember when I was learning this because there was a very clear time in my life when I had to learn to take responsibility for our emotions. And you know what I used to say regularly? Oh my God, not another one. Because I kept experiencing emotions that were horrible. They were uncomfortable. They were unpleasant. They weren't welcome. And it just seemed like they wouldn't stop coming. And so I said that over and over. Oh no, not another one. Because it was so tiring after a while to do that. But of course, you do that and you do enough of it, and pretty soon it gets easier, and pretty soon it gets to be habitual, and pretty soon you quit thinking about it. You quit, it just becomes habit. It just becomes normal. It's just the way you go through life. So if when I work with people, if I hear them use language that diverts their responsibility for their emotion, if it's coaching, then I bring it to the conversation. But if it's people, if it's relatives, if it's my sister-in-law, do I say something? No, because I don't have permission to say something, and it's really not my business, right? If she doesn't take responsibility for her emotions, it's really not my problem, right? I got enough emotions to take care of. So I think that's a very good beginning place. But another thing is that this whole question about learning and learning about emotions, really doing the work of learning emotions. The reason that happens is because we've been taught because real learning takes place in your brain, right? The real answer to anything is intellectual, it's knowledge. So if that's true, which we've been taught is true, then we ought to be able to learn emotions that way. But the trick is, emotions don't work that way. Emotions work differently. So we have to think about how we learn emotions differently than the way we learn math. And to Marcel's point, there are emotions that allow us to learn deeply emotions. So if you think about what is curiosity? Well, we just keep coming back to investigating. We often think of curiosity as intellectual, but emotional curiosity would have us experience emotions, to reflect on emotions, to be with emotions. Why? I want to see what's going to happen when I allow this emotion, like Thaisa said, to hang around. Like, I want to see what happens. I'm curious about that. It's not that I want to figure it out intellectually. I'm curious emotionally to see what happens when I immerse myself in emotions. But there are other ones. Perseverance, I think, is a huge one. I think we just keep looking for ways to understand emotions better. For me, I know that self-compassion was really important. Why? Because it's hard. It's really hard work to learn emotionally. I think I wrote in that opening section, no learning in my life has ever been as hard as emotional learning. But it's been worth it. It's been worth every drop of sweat that I've ever felt because I was learning emotions, because it gives you so much once you learn emotionally. So for me, the answer to Marcel's question is, yeah, you know what? There are emotions that help us learn about emotions. And when people don't want to, there are emotions that prevent them from learning about emotions. If you think about contempt, right? People go, emotions, worthless, waste of time. Well, we probably heard that from people. We might have felt that sometimes. Um, Cynicism, right? Skepticism can be helpful because it has us questioning what to believe. But there's lots of emotions where if we're intolerant of the discomfort of emotions, if we're urgent to learn emotionally, if we're impatient, because that's not how we learn emotionally. Emotional learning takes time and requires immersion. Intellectual learning does not. Intellectual learning is through insight and it happens almost instantaneously. So the whole methodology of learning emotions is different than intellectual learning. And everything we've built, as far as I can see, in terms of traditional education, helps us learn intellectually, but it does nothing to help us learn emotionally. And this is why I think we struggle with lots of things. I think this is why we struggle with students' behaviors in school. I think it's why we struggle to form teams in an organization because people have never learned that emotions are the root of every relationship. And so if you aren't developed emotionally, if you can't name emotions, if you're not comfortable with emotions, if you can't work with emotions, then they're not at your disposal. And it's very different. The emotions that allow you to be independent and work independently are very different than the emotions that allow you to work in teams. Well, if you haven't learned that, you may be good at one, but you're not any good at the other. And then in organizations, we blame people for that. We say, well, that person just doesn't care. That person is resigned. That person's resentful. That person is, but you know what? We haven't ever given them the tools to be good at this, in my view, ever. So that's really what this is all about. It's all just about, okay, well, let's build a foundation so we can have this tool at our disposal. We can decide how to use it in the way that we think best in our individual life, in our relationships, in our families, in our organizations, in our relationship with nature, in our relationship with divinity. We get to decide because emotions are the basis of every one of those relationships. So let me stop. I know there's a lot more questions here. I'll get to them, but I just said a lot. Any insights, thoughts, questions, challenges? Yes, Masoom.
Hi. As we were talking about intellectual curiosity and emotional curiosity. So, intellectual curiosity can be triggered, with emotions. In institutions, intellectual curiosity is often triggered with some character or some chapter or something. But is it possible to trigger emotional curiosity in someone? Like, so that they can sit with their emotions, or we can sit with our emotions,
Hmm.
and we can be curious about, okay, what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. So I think so, because I think if I have a question in my head intellectually, well, what's the emotion connected with that? It's curiosity, right? I want to know more. But when I talk about emotional curiosity, I'm saying, well, I'm curious to know what emotions are, how they feel, what happens if I just sit with them. So I think we can. I think we can design exercises. I think we can create conversations with people where we invite them to take a look. So, sometimes, and I'll use coaching just because coaching is a kind of conversation where this is what we're talking about, right? Is that, for instance, when I'm coaching someone, sometimes a leader in an organization will say, well, I know what I should do, but I'm not doing it. Okay, so you think about that. Intellectually, they know what they should do. So
Mm.
a simple question like, okay, so what's the barrier? What's keeping you from doing what you should do? And they may come up with some reasons, right? But fundamentally, where we'll get to in the conversation is an emotion. They feel dread, they feel uncertainty, they feel fear, they feel, oh, okay. So the answer is an emotion. So just through that little conversation, we can begin to help them be curious about, oh, so there's emotions that are barriers to doing what I know I should do. And then there's emotions that could help me do what I know I should do. So, wow. So if I learn something about emotions, what they're called, what they feel like, how to generate them, that would give me another whole set of tools besides this wonderful tool we have called intellect. So is that answering your question? Are you,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah?
I can
Okay.
like build up on this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think absolutely we can. But the question that I hear most often, and even coaches say this because they're not all emotionally mm, competent or they haven't studied, they haven't learned emotions. But about as far as we usually get with somebody in this conversation is, well, how do you feel about that? But when we say, how do you feel about that? A lot of people say, well, I think it's a bad idea. I think I shouldn't have to do it. Okay, so, but that's not how you feel about it. That's how you think about it. And sometimes people will say, well, I feel really uncomfortable, but that's not an emotion either. That's an experience they're having in their body. So we can be much better at asking questions that elicit identification and articulation of emotions so that we can then, in the conversation, use them as a tool. And if you had a really good friend, you could have this conversation with them as well. You don't have to be a coach to have this conversation, but it obviously shows up in coaching. But I would say, in a competent leader, it would show up in a leader. It would show up in a teacher and an educator. It would show up in, you know, lots of places. If we learn the value and how to have the conversation. Hmm. Melissa?
So many thoughts, try to condense down, but Masum, you made me think of something when it comes to drawing emotions out of or creating emotional curiosity. So there's probably two or three main things that I've learned as a crisis negotiator. So I used to talk to people who were wanting to kill themselves, and that's a purely emotional conversation. A lot of people think that it's all about persuasion or it's about having the best argument or, all of these things, but it's really just about emotion. So recognizing that we are all emotional beings because we're all human. And so that is the connecting feature that is between us to begin every conversation with. We all have emotions. And then I think it's that reserving judgment that allows people to feel safe to express their emotions. In our society, we don't create a lot of safe space for that as a rule because we are very caught up in what we think about something and do we think that other people approve of what we think or what we're going to do? Do we approve of what we think or going to do? So if we can present a non-judgmental space, at least for a few moments, that often makes for like that curiosity that people will want to share about their emotions, sometimes their deeper experiences. My husband teases me all the time that it's a good thing that I'm a good-hearted person because I can get people to like spill their guts in just like a few minutes, and I could definitely use that for bad. I would never do that, but yeah, it's that powerful.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Okay, Sandy, and then I want to move on to moods because there are a lot of questions about moods. So Sandy, oh, you're on mute, Sandy.
Thought I hit it. Um, you've heard that saying, let the silence do the heavy lifting. And over the last 3 months, um, this goes back to, emotions are made and learned. And this morning, I hear my husband, and he's heard me now for 5 years and write sticky notes all over. And this morning, he says to our son, who has just joined our real estate team, there could be two ways that I'm looking at this, right? It's about a negotiation. So I'm a little skeptical, and I'm going to also let you know about my optimism. First of all, and he's very good with his words, super smart, knows a lot of definitions of things. And I just thought that was brilliant to have that with right, family business already emotional, but just to keep Brian, right, he's putting his first deal together. So that I've been not in people's faces, right? I just every once in a while will say, well, what do you think that's, where are you feeling it? And so that was really, really cool. But again, what when you said it earlier, what we've been programmed or modeled after, right? And so just allowing them to hear me for the last 5 years and speak
Yeah.
has been huge.
Lovely. Yep. So what this relates to moods, but think about this. So everybody on this call grew up with a mother tongue. You grew up learning a language, and they were all different. And even some of us who share a language, like let's say me and Jolene, we have a different accent, right? So why is that? Just think about that for a second. Like, how did that happen? Well, the easy answer, it happened because that's what you were immersed in. You weren't born and and said, "Oh, you know what? I want to grow up learning this language. I think this is what I'll decide." We didn't. We just imitated the people around us. And so we learned to speak the way they speak. You know that in Spain, some people will say, well, the right way to say Barcelona is Barcelona, like with a th, right? Which actually in English we don't do. That has a name. You know why they say it that way? Because a lisp. Because there was a king in Spain who had a lisp. And the way the king said it was the right way to say it. And that's the way the king said it. So that's the way everybody learned to say it. Wild, isn't it? Because that's not the way Spanish works. That's the way the king spoke. I think emotions are very similar to that. And I think moods, most of all. You grew up in a home. There was a mood in that home. Maybe it was peaceful. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was terrifying. Maybe it was fear producing. Maybe it was loving. But you grew up in a space around people, and there was a mood in your home. And that's what you learned. So it's not that that's permanent, but it's deep. And how did you learn it? You learned it through immersion over time. You didn't learn it because you thought it was a good idea. Now, in some cases, if you lived in a home that for you felt dangerous, the emotion you might have learned was fear. And why would you learn fear? Because it kept you safe. It's not that you thought about it. It's not that you had the emotion of fear. You lived your entire life in that emotional energy, fear. And that's your mood. That became your mood. Now, to your point, Melissa, what's the difference? Well, a lot of people do say this. Well, the difference is emotions are short-lived and moods are longer-lived. I would say there's a far more important distinction, which is emotions are triggered by some experience. And the experience can be something I think, something somebody says, I can drop something on my toe, right? But, right, is that emotions are provoked by something, but moods aren't. Moods already exist. And the difference is that emotions allow you to react and respond to what's happening in your environment, but moods are the lens through which you see the world. So they come before the event. So what does that mean? So if you grew up in the mood of fear, the way you see the world when you look out at the world is it's a dangerous place. And why would that serve you? Because then you don't put yourself in more danger. It keeps you safe. It keeps you aware. So the mood in which we grew up, it can be patterned after what the people we grew up around. It can also be in reaction to, or a self-preserver, a life preserver for us. But it's the way I would describe it is when we're not being emotionally stimulated by events around us, if we're quiet, we drift back to that mood. We naturally go back there. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine somebody who lives in the emotion, in the mood of optimism. What's optimism? Oh, everything has a silver lining. there's always something good to see, right? So what happens? So they live, and so they look at the world and they see, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's not so good, but there's some good things about it, or there's a possibility there. That's what they're always saying. They're always talking about that possibility of something good. So when they experience disappointment, that's the emotion. And they're like, oh, that's not what I thought was going to happen. But that disappointment will come and go. Why? Because it's an emotion. And they'll drift back to what? To optimism. In fact, it may do it pretty quickly. They may pretty quickly go, yeah, well, that wasn't so good. But you know what? Tomorrow it's going to be better. And what are they saying? The way I see the world is through the lens of optimism. And so it can be an emotion like fear, resentment, anger, uh, what's it called? Resignation, uncertainty. We can live in all these moods because every emotion has a corollary mood. Any emotion can also be a mood. So you live in a mood, and maybe there's more than one, but I would argue that you probably have a primary mood. How would we know that? Because we would see a pattern. We would see a pattern of behavior. We'd see a pattern of speech, of speaking about the world. And for some people, it's like some people, they live in naivete, like in innocence. Like, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, mass murder, yeah, but you know what? He's probably got a good heart, right? Really? Other people would look at that and go, you're out of your mind. But on the other hand, right, then there's people who live in distrust. There's people who live in trust. You can live in any of these. They're very hard to see. And you know why they're very hard to see? Because they look like reality. So if I'm the person who lives in, let's say I live in gratitude, I see everything as a gift, right? That's the way the world looks to me. I'm not making that up. It's not that I want to, it's the way I see. The person who lives in the mood of fear, it's not that they want to see a dangerous world. They do see a dangerous world. It looks real to them. This is why they're so hard for us to see in ourselves. But you start asking a few people who know emotions and can name them, what mood do you think I live in? They can tell you. You may not be able to discern it for yourself, but other people can tell you. This is why coaches can do this, because when we listen, we hear the same story in different forms over and over and over. We hear from people, we say, people say over and over, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair in lots of different ways. What mood do they live in? Resentment, because resentment is about unfairness. We hear people talk about injustice. What emotion is that? Oh, well, that emotion is probably anger. So the more we know, the clearer our palette of emotions, the clearer our palette of moods. So this is what's so amazing about them, is that they're always looking for evidence that it's the right mood. Your mood is looking for evidence to reinforce itself that it is the right mood for you to live in. That makes it pretty challenging to see, let alone shift. But how do we shift it? We shift it in the same way we shift an emotion, practice. And what do we practice? New story, new body, new emotion. These three things. So I'll tell you my story. So some years ago, when I started understanding all this, one day I realized that I was wondering, like, what mood do I live in? And to my horror, I realized that I lived in the mood of entitlement. And entitlement is I deserve a certain status, I deserve a certain level of income, I deserve blah, 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 blah. But if you ask me why, Dan, why do you deserve those? I didn't have, I couldn't tell you. There was no reason why, just because that's how I think life should be. I'm entitled to those things. Wow. So you think about that. If you feel you're entitled to a red Ferrari in your driveway and there's not a red Ferrari in your driveway, what emotion do you feel? Unhappiness, right? I'm unhappy. Why? The world's not giving me the stuff it's supposed to give me, right? There's something wrong here, and it's not with me, right? Because I'm entitled to it. But I decided I don't want to live there anymore because I was really unhappy. I was looking at the glass, what is it? Half empty, half full, whatever that expression is. I wasn't getting what I should be getting in life, but there was no reason why I should. It was just my story. And I thought long and hard about this. So what mood do I want to live in? If I could shift my mood, what would it be? And I decided it was gratitude. And what's gratitude? Everything is a gift. Everything is a gift. This conversation, gift. Glass of water, gift. Everything's a gift. Waking up every morning, gift. Everything's a gift, right? So I was no longer looking at what I don't have. I was looking at what I do have. And the funny thing about it is, in gratitude, I don't know why I have these gifts. I don't know where they came from. I don't know. I don't know who gave them to me. I don't know where they originated. There's probably many of them I don't deserve, but yet I got. Wow. That's a very different way to see the world than to see the world through the lens of entitlement. So what's changed for me? It was just practice. It was saying, you know what? I know this story. Oh, what's the world not doing for me? I know this story. I'm going to change this story. I'm going to change it. Every time that shows up, I'm going to change it to this. Every time that shows up, I'm going to change it to this. And I started noticing what's the body of entitlement? And I don't know what it is exactly, but it's always, wanting more. And what's gratitude? It's just, wow, wow. Living in gratitude, how amazing is that? It's practice. It's just you're rewiring yourself. It is practice. So you can shift your mood just like you can shift your emotion. There's a story, there's an impulse, there's a purpose. It's practice. There's no big secret to it. But the story that emotions can't be changed or that moods can't be changed, I think Melissa, you might have said that, is very powerful. We live that story for a long time. And that's why people say, I love the expression, well, that's just the way I am. Well, maybe.
Ooh.
Maybe it's just the way you learn to be. Maybe it's not just the way you are. Maybe you're wired that way to some degree, but I would bet you that the majority of it is what you've learned to be emotionally, how you've learned to be emotionally. And maybe you're completely unaware of your emotional learning. That's fine. Most people are completely unaware. But once you are aware, then we can circle back to the beginning. You take responsibility. You say, I'm going to decide. I'm going to see what serves me to create the life I want to live. And if it's not serving me, then I'm going to figure out what to do about it. I'm responsible because they're mine. They're my emotions. It's my mood. Ignoring it does nothing. Yeah. So we only have 5 minutes. I'm going to quit talking. I'd love to hear from some people who haven't spoken yet. So I don't know. What would you share? What are you taking away from this? What's this helping you see that maybe you hadn't seen before? Masoom?
I would like to say something. So when you were narrating your story that you were entitled at some point in your life, that really hit home because I also feel entitled, not materialistically, but I feel entitled to people treating me nicely because I
Hmm.
have faced a lot of injustice in the past. Okay. So at my office, with my relationships, blah blah. Okay. So so in my head, I have this nuances. I have this anecdotes where people have not been treating me nicely. Okay.
Yeah.
So now that when you are saying this, now that I know that I just need to change those anecdotes, and
Yeah.
it would be because I was I was just looking at everything, and I was just confused that why am I unhappy everywhere? Why am I unhappy with everybody at
Yeah.
some point? Okay, not constantly, but at some point. So this might be something that I need to change.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is where I started searching in myself. Okay, what is the
Yeah.
problem?
Yeah. Lovely.
So this is just something that I build upon that foundation. So I
Lovely.
guess,
One,
yeah.
wonderful insight. Yeah, and once you realize that, and once you realize that you can't change them, and really, I always think those people are showing up because they're part of the universe. So if they're treating me in a way that I don't think they ought to be treating me, I'm probably not going to change them, but I could change them in here. And what could I change? Well, there's an emotion that can help me. Because one of the things I would argue is that no matter what your problem is, no matter what your challenge is, there's an emotion that can help you. Always. I've never found a situation where there wasn't an emotion that could support me, help me, move me. There is, but we don't use them as tools. But if we did, we would find one. So I found mine. What was mine? Well, I moved from this to this. Okay, great. Your journey's different. Your journey's completely different. And that's great because you got this. And the one last thing I want to say is there are no shoulds with emotions. And what I mean is, it's not that I should live in gratitude. No, gratitude is fine. But gratitude is not better than entitlement. It's just different. I see the world differently. So, one thing we don't need to do is to aspire to perfection emotionally because there is no should. It's not that you shouldn't be angry. It's not that you should be loving. No, it's just that you have that opportunity in life. So, when it serves you, when it helps you, great, then leverage that emotion. But don't beat yourself up because, oh, I should be more generous. No, generosity is great, and generosity can be a big problem. It's not that you should. So just that's self-judgment. Just put that aside. You don't need that. You decide who do you want to be in this life? And only you can decide that. So. Okay, so we good for today? As always, any questions, you write to me. I'm happy to have a conversation. So here's the one thing about the next section. There's lots of emotions. I don't know how many, lots. And there's paragraphs about every emotion. If you don't have the space, time, energy to read all of that, that's fine. But scan through it, see what's there, pick a few. And what I'd love to do next time is to have a conversation like, oh, this interpretation of guilt. Let's talk about that a little bit. Or this interpretation of that emotion. Huh. Hmm. Let's take a look at that. Because I think we have a surface interpretation, a traditional interpretation, but I think we can go way deeper with our interpretations of emotions. So you have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for being here, and can't wait till next Tuesday. Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dan.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.